One of the biggest drawing points in Valheim is its absolutely massive world. From the start, you are encouraged to explore around the starting area and start branching out and discovering the hidden secrets that are scattered across the world. Finding the different biomes, different structures, and different enemies, all for the goal of getting progress in the game, whether you're fighting bosses or just hunting down additional materials. The game encourages you to explore. And of course, with a game as large as Valheim's world is, transportation is incredibly important. Now, of course, you could simply just walk from place to place. That is the easiest and most straightforward method of transportation. You could also craft a boat in order to sail across large waterways. In fact, this is almost a necessity considering that the entire map is made up of a series of islands. And then there are portals, magical structures you can create which serve as a form of fast travel, where you could place one down in one location, such as a main base, and then place another portal down someplace else, like close to a structure of interest, and then give it a name, and then teleport to and from wherever that location is. Now, these portals are rather useful in my opinion. However, there is some controversy in the Valheim community with this addition, where some believe that they never should have been added to begin with, that they detract from the enjoyment of the game. And part of me can understand that, and we'll delve into why in a little bit. And then there's another extreme where others believe that portals are an absolute necessity, where the game is virtually unplayable without them. In my eyes, both extremes that they should never be used or never have been added, or that the game's unplayable without them, both of those extremes are just that. They're extreme, and they're both wrong. But I want to explain why, in my opinion, portals are fair and balanced. And additionally, touch on a couple of these arguments, because there's merit to both, but they also both have some severe flaws. So, without further ado, let's delve into it. The first argument I'm going to get into is the one against portals. Not the extreme one, but just the one that says that it detracts from the overall experience. I can understand this to an extent, because one of Valheim's most intriguing features, and what keeps the game fresh and interesting, is how it manages random encounters, where you can just be out on even a menial expedition to, let's say, go harvest a few resources, and then something will happen that will get you focused on whatever the surprise is, like a troll wanders into your neck of the woods while you're trying to construct a new base, and now you're forced to fight it. Or you could be out in the swamp trying to farm up some Draugr for their entrails, and then stumble upon a giant wooden abomination hell-bent on killing you, just because you walked in its general vicinity and you had no idea it was there. Or you could be out on the open ocean and discover the back of a giant sea monster, just out of the blue and completely random. It's those random experiences that make the game memorable, and most of which you will only encounter by getting out on the world and figuring out what's going on by exploration. You won't get these crazy encounters by fast traveling. And again, these things help prevent the game from becoming tedious. If every single expedition to get metal was the exact same, it would feel like a grind. It would feel incredibly boring because you're just doing the same menial task over and over again and nothing's happening. So in order to prevent these tasks from becoming menial, the game will still throw stuff at you, which keeps it entertaining and will always keep you on your toes because you never know what even basic sounding adventure will turn into an epic journey that you will remember and tell your friends about. Because that's part of the magic of Valheim, is that there's a big world out there with a lot of crazy and even scary things going on out there that you need to delve into and explore in order to find them. If you just play it safe, you're not going to get out there. Now, Valheim has been referred to as the Dark Souls of survival games by some because it can be incredibly difficult. And as such, sometimes these random encounters will be incredibly dangerous. However, it is that sort of danger that will always keep you wary of what may be just around the corner. It builds a sense of mystery when you're out exploring things, where you have no idea what you're getting ready to encounter. And what sometimes may even be worse is once you learn what lurks out there in the swamps per se, let's just say, then you have to deal with them. You're going to have to get out there and deal with all the oozers and blobs and draugr and other threats you have to deal with. And sometimes that knowledge can be scary. But at the same time, there's that fear that might get you to push forward to see if you can conquer it. The drive to succeed in the game and to get the resources you need may overpower any potential fear or hesitation. Because you have a goal that needs to be accomplished. The only way to accomplish that is to brave whatever threat lurks out there. And again, a lot of the time, half the fun is just getting out there and seeing what exists in the world. And bumping into the crazy monsters that lurk out there or really cool looking generated structures. And fast travel will take away from that experience because even if you've already have a plot charted out and a pathway ready for you, you may still bump into something different. Something that you may have missed. Something on the other side of the river that you didn't look at. And that sort of thing is what keeps the game interesting. Once it becomes just a series of fast travel points, then what's the point of exploring around? You'll miss out on all the crazy encounters because, well, you're not out there exploring anymore. You've done your exploring to get from point A to point B, and now that your portal's down, now you have this easy to transport system. And not to mention that one of the biggest arguments is that the portals are available way too early. Where pretty much just after you beat the first boss, you have access to delve into the generated structure that spawns some of the needed materials to make it. And then with a bit of hard work, you can start getting your portals up pretty early on. Now this is where my little divergence in belief that this is going to be, that these are actually fair and balanced, that's where we're going to get into it here. So, let's diverge off of this argument and move on to why portals are actually okay. Why they're fair and balanced. And why they're not as bad as some may think. Let us first examine what is required to create a portal. So you need 10 Grey Dwarf Eyes, 20 Fine Wood, and 2 Surtling Cores. Seems relatively easy once you get into mid and late game, and it definitely is when you have a lot of materials to your name. However, in the early game, even after you defeat Eikthyr, the first boss, these resources are still relatively difficult to get. Firstly, in the early game, Grey Dwarves can prove to be quite threatening. They can take a lot of punishment from your early game weapons, and they hit decently hard. At the start of the game, you're going to have rag armor, and by the time you fight Eikthyr, you'll probably have leather. It's decent armor, but you can still die pretty quickly if something were to gang up on you. And Grey Dwarves tend to wander in packs. As such, you may find difficulty facing off against them with your stone axe or wooden club. Of course, as you get out there into the woods and collect the necessary metals, you can start crafting better weapons. However, until that point, you're going to be constantly harassed by these things. They're killable, definitely, but they can take some time and can prove quite dangerous. Not to mention that upon death, the eye is not even a guaranteed drop. It's relatively common, sure, but it's not 100%. So you could get lucky and get a bunch of them. Or you might kill a few of them and only get 1 or 2. And you need 10 of the things. So you have to fight through a whole horde of these creatures at times in order to accomplish the feat you want. Again, once you get better weapons and start progressing throughout the game, Grey Dwarves are no longer an issue. By mid to late game, if you have upgraded weapons, like let's say like a tier 2 or 3 iron mace or the Frostnir made out of silver, you may even be able to one-shot them. Especially if you get sneak crits in. But in the early game, it can definitely prove to be a daunting task. Now, Surtling cores are relatively rare in the early game. You find them dominantly in burial chambers hidden within the Black Forest biome, which is full of the Grey Dwarves and trolls and can be very dangerous. And the dungeons themselves are also dangerous. They're full of skeletons who hit like trucks and can take a fair bit of punishment from early game weapons. There's also a chance that ghosts can spawn inside the burial chambers, and those things are no joke in the early game. They are incredibly hazardous. Not to mention that once you clear out all the enemies, you may not find as many Surtling cores as you'd want. You can get anywhere from maybe even 1 to like 6 or so. Definitely enough to make a couple portals. However, Surtling cores are also necessary ingredients to create smelters and a charcoal kiln. Both incredibly useful crafting stations that you will need in order to get the fine wood to create the portal. Because in order to get that, the Surtling cores are easy enough. Just brave a bunch of difficult enemies and survive the burial chambers with your early game gear. Grey Dwarf eyes might take a bit of farming. You might die a bit, but with a bit of patience you can get it done. However, for the fine wood, there is a detailed list of things you need to do in order to gather these materials. Step 1. Fight and kill Eikthyr, the game's first boss. You will need to collect the hard antlers it drops in order to craft your first pickaxe. Once dead, you can collect the hard antlers and then take those back to your crafting table in order to create the pickaxe. At your workbench, you can select the antler pickaxe and use 1 hard antler and 10 wood to create the pickaxe. With this, you can now venture into the Black Forest and collect copper and tin. As mentioned earlier, the Black Forest can be dangerous with Grey Dwarves, Grey Dwarf brutes, and shamans wandering around, as well as trolls. Additionally, you need to collect a lot of copper and a lot of tin, both of which weigh a lot. And also, the yield for tin is solid, but for copper, you're going to end up mining through chunks of this material for a long period of time and fill up on stone a lot of the time. Additionally, the antler pickaxes are pretty slow, and also building up your pickaxe skill can take a fair bit. And again, not to mention the existing threats found throughout the biome. You need a lot of copper and a lot of tin in order to create bronze. And additionally, you also need to use your acetylene cores that you've gathered to create a charcoal kiln for a reliable source of coal, and also use a bit for a furnace or a smelter in order to smelt down the ores you collect. Otherwise, they're useless. Which means that you're going to need to collect a fair few cores to create all of these necessary structures. Once you finally have enough materials to create it, you can go into your forge, which you also have to craft, and select a bronze axe and use 4 wood, 8 bronze, and 2 leather scraps to create this one tool that you will need to chop down birch trees in order to get fine wood. Then the rest is pretty self-explanatory. Just keep wailing on a tree with your new axe till it falls, and then chop the axe into collectible resources. Chop the axe, yes. Chop the log into usable materials. I can English, I promise. And after all that work, you finally have one portal. Now, once you have the bronze axe and needed tools, it's pretty easy to get another one. You just need to make sure you have the cores, chop down enough fine wood, and kill a bunch more gray dwarves in order to get the eyes. And then you're good to go and get more materials to build the second one. However, it can be kind of costly on resources in the early game. As you progress through your gameplay, you will obviously have more resources to your name and will be able to create more portals as you go along. That's not it being super easy. That's not the game holding your hand. That's just how survival games work. Over time, you naturally are going to have more supplies to your name. And you can therefore use those supplies to create more useful structures for your growing settlements. That's usually the rule of survival games. That's the point. Just continue to progress and keep getting better stuff. So in my opinion, portals are fair and balanced in the early game because it takes a fair bit of work in order to acquire simply one portal. You still have to make another one, then make sure you have the name you gave it written down someplace so you remember what to properly set it as, because I can't tell you how many times in my multiplayer server I've plumb forgot the name that a friend gave the portal and then try to figure it out when he's offline. It can be frustrating. But that's partially my bad. I mentioned this more positively earlier, but one of the reasons why portals can be necessary is because Valheim is incredibly hard. Or can be seen as necessary, is that Valheim can be incredibly hard. You're going to face a lot of threats that can one-shot you. Leave your stuff out in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes if you don't have enough stuff to create a new raft or boat, you could easily lose that stuff for quite a bit of time, which can be incredibly frustrating. Sure, you could always start over, gather up more materials, and then go get your stuff when you're better equipped again, and have full-on rescue missions to gather your stuff. I've done that a few times. But at the same time, sometimes having that fast travel option can be easier, and can even save you that frustration. Now, I'm not sitting here trying to say necessary as saying that you can only play the game with portals. You don't need to have portals in the game in order to actually play it. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, it's a game. Part of the beauty of gaming is, unlike other forms of media like books or movies, let's say, you can interact with them. you have autonomy to decide how you want to play it. So if you want to play with portals, go right on ahead. They're there. But if you don't want to play with portals, that's fine. However, there's no one right way to play Valheim. You have autonomy to play it however you want to. And don't tell other people how they should or shouldn't play the game. That's up to them. If they want to play the game with portals, that's not being disrespectful to the game. That's not being counterintuitive to the game's quest for adventure. That's just how they want to play the game. Maybe they view it as more convenient. Maybe it helps them stay sane after getting murdered by drakes over and over again. Being able to teleport back to that mountain and run back up there and gather their stuff back. At the same time, don't tell other people that the game is unplayable without portals. Because it is very much playable without portals. If you don't want to use fast travel for the entire game, that's fine. In fact, it's very respectable. It shows your dedication to it. I have a few friends who use portals but would prefer not to. Use it out of convenience, but in their own worlds don't build portals because they don't want to use them. That's A-okay. Again, it's commendable, it's respectable, and it's how they want to play the game. And that's fine. But just don't tell other people how to play the game, okay? Because everybody's different. Everybody's going to want to experience it differently, and is going to see what is considered disgraceful to the game or whatever in different ways. If that even is such a thing, because again, everything is person to person. There's nothing that can really disgrace the game. It's however you want to play it. That's all. Oh wait, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention one final thing that kind of points to the fact that these things are fair and that portals are fair and balanced. Regardless of what stage of the game you're in, you cannot teleport metal through portals. If you're out there mining copper, iron, what have you, you can't teleport it back. So if you want to take that back to your main base, you're going to have to hoof it. Either just put up with the weight and then walk, or load it up into a wooden cart or boat and drag it along with you. Additionally, one of the boss summoning items cannot be teleported. This is the Dragon Egg, used to summon Motor, the game's fourth boss. You need 3 of them in order to summon the boss. And each egg weighs a whopping 200 pounds. That's a lot. And without Megingjord, a magical belt that you can get at the merchant, if you haven't found the merchant yet, you don't have access to it. You can't craft it. You can't buy it from somebody else. You can only get it from the one merchant that spawns in your world. You have to get out there and locate it. Then have enough gold found from killing trolls or fulling, or found within troll caves, burial chambers, or sunken crypts. Have enough gold in order to purchase the thing. That'll get your carry weight up to be able to carry an egg and a few other things comfortably. However, without Megingjord, and if you're playing solo, dragging these eggs around can be painful. Because again, you're going to have to drag these things up to wherever the boss summon thing is. It might be one at a time. And it's definitely going to be easier playing multiplayer for this. Because you could have other friends carry the other 2 eggs you need. You can carry one, then have a couple friends carry the other 2. And that'll be pretty easy. But in single player, it can be tedious. And again, you cannot teleport these things. So you're going to have to get resourceful in order to successfully transport these necessary items to the boss summoning location. And I've heard some people say, oh yeah, well, I know that you cannot teleport metal through it, but that's not really that big of a deal. Well, actually, in my book, metal is one of the most important resources in the entire game. Sure, the loot that you can get from bosses can be teleported. Sure, a bunch of the different types of wood can be teleported. Tools, gold, treasure, all of that can be portaled from place to place with relative ease. However, the really hardcore, heavy-duty materials that you need to create better weapons and armor, that can't be teleported. So you're going to have to figure out how to hoof the real haul back to your base. It can prove tedious at times, but again, Valheim does have a way of throwing curveballs at you. So it's not all bad. However, it is this check and balance that keeps portals balanced and doesn't just allow you to have an easy pass whenever you want it. Because if you have these very specific items in your inventory, you can't teleport. Easy as that. And again, sometimes it can be very inconvenient, but you have to get creative and figure out other ways to get from point A to point B with the much needed resources that you've collected. So those are my thoughts on Valheim's portals and why I personally believe that they are fair and balanced, even though you can get them at a relatively early age in the game. What do you think? Do you agree with me, or am I just out of my mind? Let me know in the comment section down below. And again, just as a final reminder, I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't use portals. That's up to you. I'm just explaining why I personally do and why I personally feel like the system they have in place right now is fine. But feel free to have a different opinion and let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, Maxusthebeast is out.